Welcome to the Sisters in Crime Writers Podcast. Everyone has a unique writing journey, so join us for conversations about those journeys from the writers themselves. Hi, this is Julie Henriques, the Executive Director of Sisters in Crime, and I am really delighted to welcome Carol Pouliot to the podcast this week. A former language teacher and business owner, Carol Pouliot writes the acclaimed Blackwell and Watson time travel mysteries, traditional police procedurals with a time travel twist and a seemingly impossible relationship between Depression-era cop Steven Blackwell and 21st century journalist Olivia Watson. With their fast pace and unexpected twists and turns, the books are known for their attention to historical details, rich atmosphere, and multi-layered plots. They've earned praise from readers and mystery authors alike. Carol's the former president and program chair of her Sisters in Crime chapter, co-chair of Murderous March, an online mystery conference, and a founding member of Sleuths and Sidekicks. Carol teaches a workshop for beginning mystery writers entitled What's So Great About Agatha? She enjoys speaking to groups interested in reading and writing and loves talking with book clubs. Her email address is on the contact page of her website. When not writing, Carol can be found packing her suitcase and reaching for her passport for her next travel adventure. Carol, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie.
Well, I'm delighted, and I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm going to start where I always start. When did you say to yourself, I want to write a book?
About 5 years after I retired from teaching, I got started in this whole writing game much later than a lot of people. I was already 60 years old, and I had been retired for 5 years after, a 35-year career. And I realized that I wanted a mental challenge, and more than the Sunday New York Times crossword puzzles would give me. So I wrote a couple of articles for Victoria magazine, and they were published, and I was thrilled with that, but they're only 700 words each. And so I thought, well, I'll just write a book. I mean, as ridiculous as that sounds, it was just a challenge. I like to challenge myself. So that's what it was.
So let's break this down a little, Carol, because this is a unique answer to this question.
Mm-hmm.
So had you written before short stories, anything else that sort of inspired you to go in this direction?
No, never. No, the first article that I wrote for Victoria magazine, it was a memoir. And they set me up for completely unrealistic expectations. I emailed the article early afternoon, whatever day it was. And the next morning, the editor called me. I mean, less than 24 hours, and said, we'd like to publish this. And where have you been writing? And I said, well, this is the first thing I ever wrote. And she said, oh my God, we want more. So I thought that, that was a huge boost. Mm-hmm. I thought, at least I know how to write 700 words. So let's see if I can, make go like 10 times more than that and make it into a full-length novel. So.
And was it always going to be mystery when you decided to write this novel?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I was, your average Nancy Drew kid. And then I went to Agatha Christie in my teens. I don't remember when, but it's sometime in my teens. And that's really what I read. I realized that I should challenge myself and I should stretch myself to lots of different genres, but I just love mysteries. So, and that's kind of what I know. I was familiar enough so that I thought, I've been reading mysteries for 50 years. I should be able to come up with something and write something.
Right. So,
Yeah.
well, should be able to and doing it are two different things. And
Yes.
I think
Yes.
this is actually going to be inspiring for folks to hear because a lot of people think, well, since I was 4 years old or this or that, but folks who came to it later in life had a lifetime of reading so that, your brain has absorbed structure and things like that. But when it comes to the practice, how did you build your craft?
Well, so let me backing up for a second. I taught French and Spanish. So in college and in grad school, I never even read the usual great classics in English that everybody assumes most Americans have read. So, my background was mostly French literature. And although that can translate literally into structure for a book in English, um, I had no writing classes. I had never taken a workshop. I felt really isolated here in central New York. I didn't know any writers. I didn't know there were writing conferences. I had I didn't think there might be workshops. And I really struggled the first few years. And I knew I had a good idea. I thought I had a really good idea. And so I just put it down and my first draft was I didn't fuss with it too much because I didn't even know you wrote multiple drafts. I
Right.
got through college by writing one copy of everything,
Right.
even my master's. I mean, I never wrote drafts. So that was something I even on that basic level, I had to learn. And I somehow had the impression that you sent these query letters off to agents and editors. So I did some of that. And I got wonderful responses. We love your idea, but the manuscript needs work. But I didn't know what that meant. I mean, in retrospect, this is a gross exaggeration, but honestly, I feel like I spent a few years moving commas around. I just was so lost. I didn't know. And here's where Sisters in Crime comes in, because I would not be published without Sisters in Crime. I heard about the contest that St. Martin's Minotaur has for a first a mystery. And I saw the name of a recent winner, and I had just read the woman's book. And I took a chance and went to her website and emailed her and said, what should I do? How do I know when this is ready? I want to submit this to the contest. And she gave me the usual answer, when you can't do anymore, when you'll know when it's ready. Well, obviously I didn't. I lost. But in the meantime, she said, the best advice I can give you is join Sisters in Crime. I immediately looked for a local chapter, which is about 3 hours drive away in Albany. I joined. Over the next, I'm not sure, a couple of years, I drove down every single month. I stayed overnight. I started learning what was available for me to learn how to turn this manuscript into something somebody wants to buy off the shelf or take out of the library. So I was not having much success in finding an agent or an editor. Maybe if I had waited longer, but I got impatient. I was already in my early 60s by then, and I didn't want to wait a couple years for an agent and then another year or so for that person to sell it. And one of our Sisters in Crime meetings, there was a woman, Marnie Graff. I will forever be grateful to her. She came and spoke to us and told us about the Authors Co-op that she is a founding member of. I never heard of Authors Co-ops. I didn't know what that was all about. So after her talk, I spoke with her and I said, I think I would like to send my manuscript to you. And they ended up publishing the first edition of my first book. And from there, I did go on to a traditional publisher. But Sisters in Crime is what made all the difference for me. I started going to workshops and going to conferences, listening to people, learning. There was a local woman that I found who was an English professor at one of the colleges. She sat down with me and gave me a few little basics that made a huge difference. So finally, I was 66 when the first edition of the first book was published.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story. And it also shows your perseverance. I mean, your determination to get this done.
Yeah. When I set a challenge in front of myself, I pretty much stick with it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the idea and it coming to you, because you didn't make this first book easy on yourself, did you? I mean, you had a complicated idea. And you saw it through, but that's also adds layers.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I knew it was going to be a mystery, but how many hundreds of thousands of mysteries are out there? And I was trying to think of something a little bit different, not too different, but just a little bit different so that it would make my books stand out. I knew I wanted to do police procedurals because I like the structure of that. I think I would be awful at an amateur sleuth. I like the structure that the cops know what they're supposed to do. There's a process. And one day I was online. I don't remember what I was looking for, but somehow I stumbled across something that Einstein said. And he believed there was no such thing as past, present, and future. He thought all time happened simultaneously, and he thought time could fold over. As soon as I saw that, I remembered a very strange experience I had when I was 29, and I will tell you because it sets up the whole series. 29 years old, 1979. I was living alone in my first apartment. I was teaching. It was a school night. I was asleep, middle of the night. I woke up in a flash. And before I opened my eyes, I knew somebody was in the apartment. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've ever lived alone, you know the feeling. There's a different feeling in the air and the atmosphere that, oh my God, I'm not alone anymore. And my apartment was so small that the only place my bed could be was in line with the door and then down the hall. And I could see into the living room where I always left a light on at night. So I opened my eyes and there was a strange man standing at my bedroom door. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't have a heart attack. I was beyond terrified. My heart was beating out of my chest. I was paralyzed. I couldn't have even reached to the phone to call 911. And because of the light in the living room, I could see little bits, like he would turn his head, little bits of shadows and stuff. And I remember him to this day, about 5'10", 5'11", average build, dark brown hair, but it was slicked back. It was not the way guys were wearing their hair in 1979. It was more like the 30s, that slicked back look. He had a dark brown and dark green plaid flannel shirt on, tucked into dark corduroy pants. He leaned into the doorway, peered in at me, stood up, looked confused, shook his head, turned and walked through the wall. I'm still speechless. I reached for the light. I sat there and shook uncontrollably for, 20, 30 minutes. It happened 3 more nights. So by then, I wasn't scared anymore, but I was wondering, what in heaven's name is going on? I mean, I don't do drugs. I wasn't drunk. I mean, I was awake. I had no explanation. And the 4th night, I thought, well, I just have to interact. I mean, I have to take a little control of this. And I said, hello, are you real? And he never came back again. So fast forward, to when I saw that thing online about what Einstein said, I thought, I wonder if that was a time slip. What if Einstein was right? Because I have no other explanation for what happened.
Yeah.
So as soon as I saw the Einstein thing and I remembered that weird experience, there was my series right there. The guy at the doorway became Steven. Olivia is not me, but of course I wanted a female sidekick. So that's how Olivia came into it. And as soon as I thought of it, I knew their entire story. I thought I can do this in 7 books. I know how it begins. I know how it ends. I just know them like they were always there and I just hadn't seen them. It was so strange. And I'm starting book 6 now and I'm right on track. Everything is going as planned.
So this is fascinating to me on a number of levels, but I'm going to stick with the writing because that's an incredible story. But it's also incredible that you had the presence of mind and the creative mind that said, I'm going to take this extraordinary thing that happened, and this is inspiring me to write this series. Now, when you arced it over 7 books, why 7 books?
I'm not quite sure. I thought they need to do this, and then they need to do this, and then they need to do this. And my mind, the relationship between the two of them, the friendship and then later relationship, I just sort of hit high points in my mind. And it seemed like 7 books would do it.
Yeah. No, it's a great, but arcing stories within a novel is tricky enough, but over 7 stories. And again, the relationship you're evolving and you know how, but that's a lot to wrap your arms around for your first book. Never mind.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I see what you're saying, but it didn't feel like that. And I always felt, well, if I'm wrong and it's 5 books, then I'll stop. And if I'm wrong and it's 8 or 9 books, I'll keep going.
Right.
I mean, it was more of almost like an educated guess because I want them to be here in book 2 and here in book 5, like that.
And so, you've got a lot of things going on, a lot of different genres. You're mashing up a couple of genres, right?
Yeah.
Which is actually these days, a lot of people are doing that and people get excited by that. But, when you started this, it might not have been as hot an idea to mash up time travel and historical and police procedural and everything else.
Yeah, that was the number one reason why I got rejected everywhere in the beginning. I remember someone in particular, I won't say who or what publisher, met at a conference and he had sent me a no thank you email. So I thought he just doesn't get it. So I grabbed him, well, not literally, but, interfered with his walking down the hall at one point. And I said, hi, I'm Carol Pouliot and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you said in your email that you wouldn't know how to market this. What do they do with the Harry Potter series? Do they have any question like, oh, there's so much magic. Does it belong in, whatever the Dewey Decimal System is for magic? No, it's a kid's book. It's a kid's adventure book. This is a mystery. Just happens to have a little time travel in it. And, we had a conversation and he said, all right, send it to me again. Let me look again. He still said no, but I felt good about that. But that was the biggest hurdle in the beginning, that I would say more than half of the people said, I just don't know what to do with this.
And this is an important thing to talk about, Carol, because, I talk to people about querying and do things, talk about this a lot. When people agents and editors do know need to know what shelf to put it on. So when
Yep.
you come up with comps, comparable titles, that helps them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and having many lists and TV shows and movies can be comps. I mean, there's a lot, but this was a challenge for you. I can only imagine, especially since, as I said, nowadays people are more open to the genre mixing, but they still need to understand how are they going to sell it. And that's not due to lack of imagination on that part. That's their pragmatic, okay,
Yeah, that's real
what
life.
shelf does it go on?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just kept stressing this is a traditional police procedural.
Yeah.
And my character doesn't play the piano. He happens to be able to time travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just it's an ability that my cop didn't know he had, and my female journalist had no clue that she was able to do it. But just like I'll go back to the Harry Potter books, just like those books where magic is simply a part of their daily life, traveling back and forth in time is just a part of Stephen and Olivia's life. More so hers. The books really take place in 1934, except for the latest one. But I find it more interesting to go back in time, and I wanted to set the books in the 1930s. And I only have Stephen going into the future a couple of times because we know what the future is. We're living it,
Right.
what his future is. Yeah.
So, adding to your layers of difficulty in writing this book, a historical requires a lot of research.
It sure
And
does.
a police procedural historical, another layer of research. But, people historical readers will read historical mysteries as well. It's like a bigger Venn diagram of people who are interested in it.
Right.
But they're also really want it to be accurate. Talk to me about that research phase. I mean, had you always been a history buff or interested in that period of time, or how did you delve into that part of the research?
Well, funnily enough, in school, I hated history. But, here is something that happens when you don't prepare adequately. I decided, first of all, I've had to do a lot of math writing my books because I have to figure out how old people are in different times. And therefore, I have some characters that are a baby or a teenager in Stephen's time, but in Olivia's time, they're elderly women. So I had to do all kinds of math to make sure that everything was logical and the person wouldn't have to be 115 years old. I had a lot of figuring out to do. I chose the 30s, the early 30s, because that span made sense. My father, for example, was 11 in 1934. I got to interview him before he passed away, and he gave me some great stuff. But characters who were logically either a baby or a teenager could reasonably be 80 years later, alive and kicking and so forth. But so that was one reason I chose the 30s. The other, I love the golden age of mystery. And I just thought it would be nice to put my books in that time period. And I love the golden age of travel, although until the latest book, it didn't really come up too much. I mean, I wasn't going to have Stephen and Olivia be wealthy enough to take a steamer, to Europe. But what I didn't think of was that's the middle of the Depression.
Yeah.
It never crossed my mind. I was so focused on everything else. And I generally research as I'm writing. I'll be into a scene. Oh, I need to know this detail. So I look it up. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to really become familiar with the Depression. one of the first things I learned was there were pockets in the United States that were almost untouched, very lightly touched, because they had some kind of local industry that was needed. And everybody was able to grow their own food and they helped each other. So I decided that was the town that I was going to have, because my books were not going to be a social commentary on the Depression. It's just the time they're living in. Yes, people are tightening their belts in the town that I invented, and there are some people without a job, but they're moving along without bread lines down Main Street, basically. So luckily, I love research. I just love it. I mean, if I could spend my life in a library looking things up, that's what I would be doing. So I had to really control that whole rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I found information in amazing places. I tried to go with primary sources first. When I would go to my Sisters in Crime chapter, there's the New York State Library is in Albany. That's our capital. And I contacted them ahead of time, and each of my books takes place in a week. So I had them get the magazines and newspapers from that week so I could read what was going on and get some ideas of prices and what they were advertising and that kind of thing. What was important to people, what was in the editorials and stuff. Then, like I said, I interviewed my dad. I have a young boy in the second book, and I needed to know some stuff about a young boy's life. Do they have part-time jobs? And my father had three, but they still found a way to keep a nickel to go to the movies every Saturday night. So these are real life things I was able to put in. And in terms of police procedure, I started out with the guy that used to be the chief of police for Syracuse Police Department. And he was able to imagine what it might be like in 1934 based on what they were doing nowadays. Well, he passed away, and I ended up meeting someone who not only is a cop, but he's a police historian. So he knows what Stephen would be doing in 1934. So I have my cop go over the manuscript with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that everything that Stephen is doing and what the police department's doing, and in the new book where Stephen's a fish out of water in Paris in 1895, what that would be like. So I'm sure that I've got that stuff right, because it's fair for people to want to read a book, and those historical details I feel should be correct. I want mine to be right, put it that way.
Yeah.
And then the latest book, the Murder at the Moulin Rouge, that's pretty much my life. I was a French teacher, and I went to France a lot. I took kids to Paris. I was their tour guide. So my problem with that one was not sounding like a tour guide, not putting in too much information as they drove by the Eiffel Tower or some other monument. So that, and I lived in France for a while, so I knew how families interacted and how they eat and those kinds of details. So there's authenticity there. That's just stuff that I knew.
Now, when you are writing these books, you set up the world or the worlds, because it's a lot of different things, but these characters, do you know what's going to happen in the next book, or do you find a hook in that all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is the next book, this is something I want to involve, I want to bring up?
Well, there's two answers to that. The Stephen and Olivia plot line, I know what has to happen with them in the next book, so that's one thing. But generally, I set a challenge for myself in each book In the second one, I wanted to focus on the women who were involved with my victim. I wanted to delve into these women's lives and really get inside of them. The third one, I wanted to have the reason for the crime take place way, way back in the past. So I was adding lots of other time periods in to the already, potentially confusing time travel. And I wanted to be sure it was very, very clear. So that was my big challenge there. In the fourth one, my challenge, I wanted to do a modern version of the classic English country house murder, basically a closed door, a la Agatha Christie. This fifth one, I had to take them to Paris in 1895 because of the character arc of Steven and of Olivia. They had to be away from family and friends in a completely different world for each of them to resolve something that was bothering them. In the sixth one that I'm working on now, my challenge to myself is the focus is a house. And I think I'm going to let you inside the house's thoughts, a little Gothic type thing. And the seventh one, I have no idea yet. I just know how it ends in terms of Steven and Olivia. So
yeah. Steven and Olivia are the driving.
Oh, yeah.
The driving force behind these adventures.
Yeah, and I would say that all my books are character driven because I'll start thinking about the next book when I'm finishing up the one that's about to be published. And I think about it for a year. I don't sit at the computer for a whole year. I might have a pile of notes on my desk, but they're all over the place. There's no organization at all. Every time I think of a phrase or a word, might be a word I want to use, or somebody's name, I jot it down and throw it on the pile. But I will be creating the characters. I'll pick my victim. I'll create the characters around that person. And I do all of that. And then whatever else I need to fill in around it, that comes much later.
Do you plot or do you, pants? Are you a hybrid? How much do you know about the book after sitting with it for a year before you start writing?
Well, I'm doing it differently now. In the beginning, I wrote meticulous outlines. And for the first two books, I got to the end and I realized the person I thought was going to be the killer was not the killer. And the third book, I had a knee replacement and I lost 4 months. I couldn't sit at the computer for 4 months. So I didn't have time to make my outline. So I'd been thinking about it and I just sat down and wrote it. And I liked that much better. I never know who the killer is. I think I do, but I'm always wrong. And that's the fun of it for me. I have a quote on my desk by Robert Frost. He says, no tears in the reader, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. And that's become, I guess, my mantra. Because I am constantly surprised. I have my character dossiers. I set each person up with their greatest fears and their greatest desires and their backgrounds. And I may never use any of that, but I know who that person is. So once I let them loose, sitting at the computer, they have to act the way they act. And I love it when I didn't realize what somebody was going to say or do. So much fun.
When you write this series, with time travel, you got to make up rules, right? I mean, about how it affects the future and this, and then you have to stick with your rules. Is there anything in this rule setting up that you did at the beginning that you wish, I wish I could have done this differently now because it's getting in my way?
And I did something in the first book, and I realized I was still writing the book. I realized some chapters later, I don't know how long later, that if I let this happen, it's going to cause me problems later. So I walked it back. And I can tell you, basically, Stephen was in the pantry off the kitchen, and he heard Olivia and her friends having a birthday party for this old lady neighbor. And I realized, no, I can't go there. They can't be popping into each other's time all the time. So I walked it back, and I had them have a conversation. As I was figuring some of it out, I turned what I was trying to figure out into conversations with them. So, and I tried to think, what's the reader going to think at this point? So I take the reader's thought and I put it into Olivia's mouth, and it goes in the conversation. And I have to say, one of the biggest compliments, maybe the biggest compliment I ever got, was after the first or second book. I was at a book club in the Albany area, and the room was pretty full. There were about 40 people there. And after I gave my talk and, we went over the usual stuff, I said, were there any questions or comments or anything? And a woman raised her hand and she said, I read a lot of time travel books, and yours is the first one that I think it really could happen. And I thought, wow, well, I've done my job.
Yeah.
That really, really, made me, feel great. But then coming back to your question, the other thing, in the beginning, Stephen and Olivia were extremely careful not to do anything that could change what would be the future. But they've relaxed a bit, because I think you would relax. You go to New York City for the first time, and you're paying attention to your purse, and you're looking around you, and you're a tourist. But by the 25th time, you're a lot more relaxed. And I think it's very normal for them to not be so focused on every single move they make. And I also have them have a conversation in one of the books that, well, if we can do this, that it must have been it was meant to happen. So, after all, it's fiction. So
I know.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to think about. So you, made this series challenging for yourself. You did it. So writing is one journey, publishing's another journey. And you talked about reaching out to, an editor and saying, let's talk again, helping me, which probably also helped you in your queries and everything else. But talk to me about what you learned about the publishing journey that might be helpful for folks to hear.
Well, I think the most important thing is, where are you in your life right now, and what are the most important things to you? First of all, nothing's perfect. You're not going to find the perfect editor or publicist or agent. It just doesn't exist. There are going to be things you may disagree about. There's going to be something. Mm-hmm. So you need to figure out what you can live with and what's the most important thing to you. And I realized that I'm in my 70s now, and I want as little stress as possible. So I don't want anybody pushing me to do, for example, a book every year. I don't want that. And I have a publisher who's okay with that, and I'm grateful for that. If I had an editor and a different publisher, it's possible that they would be pushing me, and that would be a deal breaker for me. Because really, this is my third career, and this is supposed to be fun. And if it's not fun, I'm done. Yeah. I'll write it and I'll post it online for free, So I think, and again, when I was querying for the second book, I knew I wanted to go with a traditional publisher, and I didn't want to wait too long because I didn't want to be too far into the series. And they say, oh, no, you're halfway through the series. We don't want that, you know?
Right.
So I have to say it was a horrible year because, as many people know, you send your baby out there and you may not hear ever. You may hear 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. So you're waiting, not knowing if they've seen it, rejected it, still reading it, still not sure. You don't know. And I didn't like that feeling of being in limbo. So I decided not to have an agent, that I would do this myself. And I got very lucky. I submitted to Level Best, and I had met Sean Riley Simmons at Malice Domestic, and she didn't really remember me, but I had kept her information. And about, I don't know, 7 or 8 months in, I decided I would email her and ask her where I stood in the queue. And she very graciously said, let me go look. And she said, this looks interesting. I'm going to grab it and read it myself. And they accepted it. And I was very happy, dancing around the kitchen happy. So.
Well, and I let's unpack a lot of what you said, because I think that these are good things for folks to hear. And one is, you need to decide what you want from this endeavor. You know, what matters to you? What are your goals? And they're going to be different for everybody, and they're going to be different for you at different phases of your life or with different projects.
Yeah, I mean, somebody who's a writer starting out now, and perhaps they're in their 20s or even their 30s, and they want to make writing a career that pays the bills. Well, you need an agent. You need to get with the big five,
Right.
or that's not going to happen. But if you're somebody like me, you have a lot more leeway.
Right. Right. And there's so many avenues open now that, again, even 10, 15 years ago, indie publishing or small presses or, all of these offshoots of the big five. I mean, there's a lot, but digital first, audiobooks. I mean, there's so many things that are open.
Yeah. I think that's probably the hardest thing maybe for some people. You really have to look at yourself, your life. What time do you have to give? Do you have 5 kids under 10?
Yeah.
How much can you sit down and write? Can you produce a book every year? Can you go out and on a book tour and market it? So many things to think about that I think, well, I certainly never thought about it in the very beginning. And I would be willing to bet that a lot of people don't think about that. How much time do you really have? And what are you willing to sacrifice, if anything? Because you're going to have to sacrifice something.
Right. There's only so much time. And you need to be intentional about how you divide it up.
Yeah. And what can you physically do? I have a lot of orthopedic issues, back problems, shoulder problems. I can only sit at the computer for a limited amount of time. I literally set the timer on my phone, and in an hour, I have to get up. It doesn't matter if I'm in the middle of the most fantastic paragraph ever written in the history of literature. I have to get up, because otherwise I'm done for 2 days.
Yeah.
I can't do it again. So you need to be aware of physical limitations too, if you have them.
Right. What do you wish you'd known earlier?
I spent a long time agonizing over what I thought or what I was supposed to do. Am I supposed to write every day, 9 to 5? Am I supposed to write so many words a day? All that kind of stuff. And I realized that there are as many ways to do it as there are writers. Yeah, I wasted a lot of time. And I mean, my knee replacement was horrible, but thanks to my knee replacement, I realized that, this is what works for me. Just sit down and write it.
Yeah.
So, that was a happy silver lining out of that horrible surgery. Yeah, I wasted a number of years, trying to I remember asking people, "How do you do it? Do you work Monday to Friday? Do you, so many words a day?" I
Yeah.
really, really tried to find out. Yeah, and there is no answer.
There is no answer, but again, unpacking this, you do what works for you, but also you were persistent. You
Well,
know,
I think you
you
have to be.
you do, Carol, but that's sometimes hard to hold on to or to maintain because writing a book is mentally challenging, but it's also is physically challenging to write a book. I mean, it takes, your back, your shoulders, whatever else, it's a physical act as well. And if you want to do it, you gotta keep going even when it's not comfortable.
Yeah, there are so many things you just don't think about. But I'm goal oriented and I love a good challenge. And this was something I love so much. I want to spend the rest of my life doing this. So you have to find out the way that works for you. That's the bottom
Yeah.
line. If
Yeah.
you really want to do it.
And when you say, I love this so much, that this is an audio recording, but you light up. I mean, you obviously do
Oh,
really love writing these characters in this series.
I do. I do. I'm going to miss them. I have lots of thoughts about what happens after book 7, but um, yeah, I've got to come up with something.
Yeah. But you've got a book, you're on 6 and you've got 7 still. Um, and then by then I'm sure other ideas or another Einstein quote will knock on your brain and make you think about something
Yeah,
differently.
yeah, something will come up. My books come out in September every other year, the odd years. So number 6 is called Death Moved In. That'll be September 2027. And the last one will be September 2029, just before I'm 80.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And so as people are listening to this, what what would you suggest for people at any age who sort of have this idea and they want to do it? What would you suggest?
Well, I would repeat one of the phrases I heard in my very first Sisters in Crime meeting. There's no such thing as a failed writer. There's only writers who quit.
Mm,
My first meeting in my Sisters in Crime chapter, that's what I heard, along with you have as much chance of getting published as you do getting hit by lightning. But I ignored that one. I ignored that one and I focused on the other one. I would say if you want to do it, then do it. Period.
I'm
Do it
writing
to
this
your own.
down because this is a great quote.
Oh, okay. Do it to your own satisfaction. I don't have, my goal is not to become a millionaire and to have my books translated into 80 languages. Yeah, that'd be nice. That's not my goal. I just want to write my stories because I love writing them and I want to share them. So I'd like as many people as possible to read and enjoy them. That's it. I don't think it's a huge unattainable goal. And maybe your goal is to write it, print it out, go to Staples and get a bunch of copies and just give it to your family and friends. What's wrong with
Right,
that?
right, right.
You
Well,
know?
and again, writing and publishing, two different journeys. You
Yeah,
control your writing journey. The publishing journey, you don't have control over all the time. So focus
right.
on what you can control.
Focus on what you really want to do,
Yeah,
you know? Yeah.
yeah. So had Level Best not happened in your life, do you think you would have pursued indie publishing?
Um, no, I'm horrible at technology. And the older I get, the worse I am. And I did not want to be involved with turning my Word doc into, the software that turns it into what looks like a book. I didn't want to be involved in all that. I wanted somebody to do all that for me. So I would have kept looking. I probably would have gone to more conferences where you could meet agents and publishers. I would have focused on that. I would have kept going because I was determined to get a traditional publisher. I might have held off on the next book and had a couple written and ready to go while I was looking. But I would have kept looking for sure.
And that's great advice, too, of keep writing. If you're writing a series, keep writing the series. Or, if you're writing a standalone, write the next standalone. Don't stop writing while you're figuring out the publishing part.
Yeah.
Well, Carol, this has been a great conversation. And I it was unexpected for me to hear about this visitor. But I love that idea. And I think a lot of people have had experiences where, you think, what's going on?
Yeah, unexplained.
And so for you, years later, but it was a catalyst for creating an entire series.
Yeah, who knew?
Who knew? Well, maybe he did.
I'm thankful. I mean, scared me to death, but I'm thankful now.
Yeah. I love that he came back too, so that it was not a one-off. It was this is really happening.
4 nights. Yeah. I never told anyone. I didn't tell my sister, my best friend. I never told anyone until I had the first book published and printed and in my hand. And that experience is chapter 1. I wrote it exactly the way it happened, except I don't have a cat. I had friends over and they said, come on, we want to know what this is like, because they had heard little bits and pieces over the previous 5 years. And I said, okay, how about if I read you the first chapter? And they said, great. So I read them the first chapter. And they said, where in heaven's name did you think about that? And I said, it actually happened. So I told them the story and they said, oh my God, never, ever, ever tell anyone that story because, the men in the white coats will be coming forward. But I ended up starting to share it. And
no, it's a great story for sure. For sure. Carol, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great fun, Julie.
Thank you for being with us today. Sisters in Crime is about community. We were founded to advocate for women crime writers, and we continue that mission by fighting for equity in the crime writing community. Sisters in Crime is an international, inclusive organization for all who write and love crime fiction, mystery, thrillers, and suspense. Join us at sistersincrime.org and make sure you subscribe to this podcast.